And we have one last speaker to close the day, and I'm really thrilled. The U.S. Human Rights Network has already gotten several shout-outs during today's proceedings for building the capacity of grassroots activists to engage at the international and inter-American levels. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rosalee Gonzalez, the Acting Executive Director of the U.S. Human Rights Network, one of our co-sponsors, who will provide closing remarks. Rosalie is an Indigenous leader in the national and international Indigenous women's movement and co-coordinator for the Continental Network of Indigenous Women of the Americas. She's organized and worked on the front lines among communities of color responding to gang and police violence, teen pregnancy, and suicide prevention. And at the global level, she has deep UN experience, having worked for the UN Secretariat of the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous People and the Secretariat of the Permanent Forum on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as well. Currently at the U.S. Human Rights Network, she is leading the efforts to build a people-centered human rights movement, and we are honored to have her here to close out the day. Thank you very much. Rosalie, over to you.
Thank you, Joan. I want to start by thanking Joan and the Human Rights Institute staff for all your hard work to organize this wonderful event. It's been reaffirming, and it's always refreshing to hear new ideas, gain inspiration from other leaders, and moreover to hear, see, and know that we are not alone. I wrote a very long 10-minute statement. I'm going to drift away because I was inspired by the final comments on this panel, and I'll start there by sharing. I was asked to do 3 things: introduce my trajectory, tell you a little bit about my reflections and experience in human rights, draw some on the key messages made throughout the day, and then ultimately leave you with some inspiring words. That's a big task with very little time. What I want to do is start with the trajectory piece. I want to say that I started as a young Chicana indígena. I am a descendant of the Tepehuanes and Kickapoo indigenous peoples with a foot in both worlds, US and Mexico, divided by the colonial border. And I was born in Oregon, raised in LA, South Central LA. I'm as urban as it gets, and it allows me to tell a story about that migration, that trajectory, which I'll spare you today. I will not get into the details. However, that trajectory leads me, as most of us, to engage not only in the defense and the rights of our community, but then for me, it opened the door to be able to work transnationally. My first foot out of the US was in 1994, joining the Zapatista movement in southern Mexico, which was the last and it is the last declaration of war by indigenous peoples of this continent against a nation state, Mexico. And with it came many, many lessons, including my capacity to see the similarities between what was happening from simple things. I mean, maybe they're not simple to most of you, but simple things to me were, why is that wall shot up? In East LA, they're all shot up. These were the common similarities to then start thinking about how we normalized the bullets on the wall and how we did not question the bullets on the wall until these international experiences occurred for me. In 2000, I'm going to give away my age. 2001, I was in grad school here at Columbia University, and my first internship was with the American Indian Law Alliance. They're a prominent NGO in the defense of indigenous people's rights at the United Nations, and I was honored to work with Tanya Ganella Fishner. If anyone knows her, may she rest in peace. She was a legend in basically not only training me, but speaking out for the rights of indigenous peoples of North America at the UN. My very first experience going out to interface with the UN was when she gave me $20 and an address and said, go speak at this meeting on behalf of our Law Alliance to a group of diplomats at the Quakers office. And I was terrified, and I said, what am I gonna say? What am I gonna say? I have no talking points. What do you want me to do? And she says, you don't need talking points. They know nothing about indigenous peoples. Just go, sound smart, and say something about us. And I said, well, where do I start? And she says, Doctrines of Discovery is the right place to begin. How many of you know about the Doctrines of Discovery? Let me see your hands. I want to see. Okay. The Doctrines of Discovery. Lisa just spoke with a lot of passion to what? Jim Crow. I want to speak very passionately about Doctrines of Discovery. This is the colonial legacy left to not only indigenous peoples, but also the Black community that says that we are not human. When first colonial settlers set foot on this land, the rules for colonization were that you could not put your flag down unless what? Terra nullis, the land is empty. How can you come to a continent full of incredible indigenous civilizations? Whether you look at the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, whether you go to Mexico and you look at the Aztecs, or you go further south and imagine the Mayan and the Inca civilizations in full force, trading and in full operation. And these first colonial settlers come and say the land is terra nullis, it's empty. Well, the reason why it was empty was why? Because they had not accepted God into their life. They were not Christians. And under the rule of the doctrines, terra nullis meant empty humans. So if you don't have God into your life, what happened? Jesus specifically, then you don't have a soul. You're mundane. And so then therefore, what we see are savages. We don't see humans. And that is the legacy that killed a Mayan young girl along the border last week. She is dispensable. She is docile, and she is not human. You can take a gun and shoot her in the head. We can do that to Ferguson. We can do that to Jordan Davis. You follow the logic? And so this is where I began telling the story of the Doctrines of Discovery to a group of ambassadors. Now I'm going to go to my speech. Not only do I want to thank Joan, but I really want to thank the board members of the U.S. Human Rights Network who are here, because you are truly, I believe, and sincerely believe, that you are legal warriors in the defense of human rights. And so I want to thank Cindy, Soho, Marcia Johnson Blanco, Lisa Crooms, and Eric Tars. Where are you, Eric? Did he leave? That legal warrior left. And a little bit theoretical is that Frantz Fanon leaves us with a very good legacy in building on what Chase just said up on stage. He advocated that those with tools of education and technical skills like law be at the disposal of the people to find solutions towards empowerment. He uses the example of technical expertise as a needed tool to build a bridge, the bridge to liberation, including decolonization. Fanon understood that our social movements need many skills, and social servants are vital. So today's event adds another brick to the foundation of that bridge. And I'm going to move on to talk about two key things that I think resonated in today. One, the common theme was about voice, giving voice to those that are harmed, and two, allowing and actually encouraging that they be the face of our human rights movement. Again, I want to draw on professor and philosopher Gayatri Spivak, who wrote and spoke and asked a very critical question about the agency of subalterns, meaning the colonized, the poor, the other. She asked, can the subalterns speak? And the response would be what? Of course, right? Our communities that we stand up for, they can speak, they have voice. Subalterns are and have always been talking, singing, and shouting. Our pleas for human rights, equality, and justice have been chanted in Selma, at the Combahee River, Wounded Knee, Standing Rock, San Isidro, Flint, Brooklyn, and in Puerto Rico, and Palestine, ¿verdad? Consequently, the question evolved. The question went from, can the subaltern speak, to can the subaltern be heard? And subsequent questions followed. What does it take to hear these voices? The voices of those suffering, for example, human rights abuses. Why can't those with privilege and conversely with power not hear those voices? Why should they hear them? Some thoughts are that in order to hear, one must unlearn privilege. This is a question to be asked not only of those in judicial power with privilege, but also among each of us, the lawyers, the professionals, the professors, those of us with technical capacities. Why should we hear these communities? Even if we ascend from these communities, why should we do anything to change the conditions that they live in? Well, intuitively, we each know that once we can hear the subaltern, we must react, we must respond, and ultimately, we must act. So today, our panelists spoke loudly. They reaffirmed the need to hear, and Todd especially invited us to see, to recognize we see what we see, not to pretend it's not there. And Sylvia invited us to feel, to be outraged, to be pissed off, and to respond accordingly. Todd opened up this day by sharing critical reflections. Among them, he urged us to think of new strategies that challenge, refuse, and disrupt the normalization of the current politics, discourse, framing, and moreover, public opinion that jeopardizes our movement. Now, he didn't name it, but it's clear that this means we can't remain silent during the white supremacist awakening, influencing decision-making and public opinion. He invites us to recognize, appreciate, and work across intersections. He stressed that, quote, we be intentional and work across silos. Why? Because we can't produce change without a national front. To Annette, we heard you. The death toll is not 64, but rather what? 4,645 deaths by the Hurricane Maria. Through the example of Puerto Rico, La Isla de Borinquen, we know that your struggle for redress is an international struggle against colonization. It's a struggle to ensure your right to self-determination and that representation be upheld. Nicole, she urged us to engage in critical, strategic communication. That's the time we're in. We have to be engaging through our media, whether it be the mainstream media or our social media, but we must engage strategically through our communication. And we must own the framing of human rights. We must educate and ensure we are clear that civil and human rights are not distinct, that they are one and the same. And moreover, we must continue to put the face of people confronting these struggles at the forefront. Roxana and Lisa Crooms, thank you for making it clear that there is great value in drawing on international instruments and mechanisms that go beyond the definitions, policies, and rights, such as the definition of racism in CERD, and the legal processes in reviewing police force under the Inter-American Court System. It's clear to all that engaging in international mechanisms and applying a human rights approach in the US does not compromise our domestic work. Actually, it increases it. Sylvia stressed that we can't abandon what we must do here at home. Clearly, it's insufficient to work internationally, and we must continue to internalize human rights issues and rights in our communities. Lisa calls on the role that our youth must have in our movement. They must be the dreamers. They must envision and act, and more importantly, without waiting for the permission from the veterans on how to do things. Along these lines, Catherine Lamont reminds us to think of our children in our work, but to think of the future of all children. In Indigenous thought, we say we must act thinking of the next 7 generations. That's our project when we work for human rights, 7 generations. Marcia reminded us of Jamil's words that influenced the direction of her work when he told her that the treaties are one of the highest obligations we have, and our work is to remind our domestic jurisprudence and political officials that this cannot be dismissed. So in sum, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and without a doubt, we must continue to mobilize, not in silos, but together. I do not want to close without saying, we heard you. Those of you that are tired, we're all tired. I'm tired. I just flew in. I will close by sharing. Oh, hold on. So I want to recognize your time, your bodies, and your spirits, and uplift you by asking you to look around this room. Really, like look to your right, to your left, forward, back. And as Chase said, what an honor to be in a room filled with woke lawyers and human rights leaders, because we are growing. So I want to close by sharing a Pueblo prayer that my Taino brother Roberto shared with me that goes like this. It says, hold on to what is good, even if it's a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it's a tree that stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it's a long way from here. Hold on to your life, even if it's easier to let go. Hold on to my hand, even if someday I'll be gone away from you. I think this prayer ends really speaking to our solidarity that's much needed. And with that, have a great day.
Thanks so much, Rosalee Gonzalez from the U.S. Human Rights Network, and everyone that's participated today. I, for one, feel luckier to be a lawyer and very inspired to move forward with my skills to work in the movements. A reminder to fill out the evaluations if you want CLE credit. And two more reminders. There is an in-family separation. Today is the National Day of Action for Children. So there's an event starting at 5 at Foley Square, which is a 10-minute walk from here, if anyone wants to go. And so they're going to be doing a walk in support of ending family separation. And then again, a reminder about the CCR event, Palestine is Everywhere. That's actually just up by Canal Street, really close. You can take the RW, you can take the JZ. It's very close. So that'll be at DCTV if anyone wants to go to that. And thank you so much on behalf of Columbia Law School and all the other sponsors for being here today.